Okay, we want to start by asking some questions and letting Mom give some answers here, so we can get some history on her and some idea about her life. I want to ask her to tell about where the Anderson family came from and a little bit of family history, just so we can see how it developed and ended up in Lehigh and so forth. So we'll go ahead and do that.
My great-grandparents are the ones who first accepted the gospel in Denmark. They lived in a town called Aarhus, I think that's pronounced that way, Denmark. And my great-grandfather, the first thing I learned about him, he had come to Utah and apparently had gone to help settle in Lehigh, Utah. And he had a daughter, brought a daughter with him, but he left the rest of the family back there until he could find mother and her mother. And there were several children. I didn't find out exactly how many because it differs sometimes. Came on the boat and came off the boat in New York. But when they got to New York, there was a fever of some kind that had, many people had caught a fever while on the boat, and the boat was quarantined in the harbor for a while. And then at that time, my grandmother, whose name was Nelfina Anderson, her mother died, and any other children who were with her, and it would have been one or two at least, they died, and my grandma was the only one that survived there. But she came along with the rest of that group across the plains, and this happened in the early 1860s, and to Utah, expecting to meet her father and her sister who were waiting in Utah for her. But when she got to Utah, she expected to meet her father and her sister. Her sister was here expecting to meet the mother and grandma and other children. But everyone had died who was coming but my grandma. And when she got here, my great-grandpa had died. And there was only grandma's sister, who was 18 years old, at the point of the mountain to meet her. And grandma was 16 when she started, possibly 17 by the time she got here. And there were only the two of them to meet. All the rest of the family had passed away. Well, my grandfather Anderson, who was living here, took her into his home, he and his first wife, whom we called Auntie as we were growing up and got to know her. They took her in their home and let her help in the home so that she would have somewhere to live. Other than that, she wouldn't have had anywhere to go. And so Auntie was very good to Grandma, they say, and as life went on and Auntie got old, she consented to have Grandpa marry my grandma when she got old enough. And this was when there was some polygamy. And so he married her, and he had the two wives for a while until Auntie died. And that's what happened to my grandma. Now, that's all I know about that. Now, on my mother's side of the family, she had my great-grandfather started across the plains with Brigham Young's and them, and he was a guard for Brigham, one of the guards. And before he got very far across the plains, he was told that he better go back and get his family because they were in danger there in Nauvoo. The mobs were doing terrible things to the women and the children and all. So he went back and got them, and they crossed the Mississippi River probably on the ice with a wagon about the size of a regular little coaster wagon that children used to have. And they strapped everything they could get onto that wagon and crossed the river that way on the ice in the winter and started out. And he never did catch up with Brigham Young's group, so they had to just gradually make their way. And he would stop on the way and try to get some work. He was a good, wonderful carpenter. And find a place to stay. And I remember one time he tells in his story that they stayed in one cabin and it had a hard earth floor, but the floor was nice and hard and there were no cracks in the logs of the cabin. So he thought they had found a really good place to stay there for a few days. And that's what they had to put up with on their way. But eventually all of them made it here. That when Grandma and her sister met each other, they had both lost all of the rest of the family. So there was a lot of sacrifice that went on there. And Grandpa was very good to her, and she had 7 children. He had 3 children from his first wife. So my father was one of 10 children. And that was the way it went. Now, my father, I could go on and tell a little more about his life now. He was the next youngest, I think. Uncle Abe was the youngest. So, Grandpa had chosen my father to work with him on the farm, and they were hard workers, and all of the other brothers got to go to college and have college educations, except my dad, and he had to work with Grandpa on the farm. But he had a wonderful opportunity to go on a mission, and Grandpa thought one of the others should go because they were better educated and all that, and he needed that on the farm. But the stake president told him, no, I want Hiram. So Hiram got to go on a mission, and he went back to Denmark and spent part of his time in Norway, part of his time in Denmark. And that was what happened to him. With my mother's family, I know a little less about how they arrived here and that, but I do remember my great-grandfather writing in his journal that one son had married Mom's mother, and he said, and she was a really wonderful woman, and he was a lucky man, and he had said nothing at all about any of the other children or their wives. So my mother grew up in a good home. Grandma was absolutely proper, and Mom became that way. Grew up very, very proper, very hardworking and very clean. A wonderful homemaker. I could never be as good. I wished I could. But we always said about Mother too, it was interesting that nobody ever saw her with a dirty apron on, no matter how hard she worked. And we never saw her without her hair combed. So that went down through the family, so I know that was true. And that's the main story about her life there. She married Dad She was born in, they were both born in 1881, and wonderful parents, and had us 4 children, and I am the last living one.
Great Mama, I've always been a great admirer of your music career, and I love that little story that you tell when you first got introduced with the piano. I was wondering if you would just tell us about how your music career got started and some of the things that you did along the way in your lifetime.
Okay, music has been a great, great part of my life. I guess I loved it before I came here. But I remember, the first thing I remember about music was in church. I would see them playing the piano and that, and I just knew I could play that piano. I got up there, and the music sounded so good to me. But I had a neighbor named Mrs. Strange, and she had a little boy about a year or so younger than I was, and he was lonely, and there were no other little boys around, and his mother asked us to come over quite often, and would we come on the porch and play with him. She had a nice big front porch, and she lived right across the street from us, and so we would come over and play with him. And it was summer, and she had her front door open, and she had a piano in there. And I remember standing at that front door with my nose against the screen, looking at her piano and wishing that I could touch it. And one day, I did that quite a lot, and one day she saw me there and she said, "Beth, would you like to come in and see my piano?" And I said yes, and so I went in there, and she let me sit down at the piano, and I started picking out "My Country 'Tis of Thee," and oh where has my little dog gone, and a few little tunes I knew like that. And it was easy to just pick them out with one finger. I just knew I could, where to go with the next one and all that. And she told my father right after that, she said, "This girl has to have a piano. You just have to have her a piano." Now my father came from a pretty musical family, but he himself didn't get to take any music or learn to sing, but he had a brother who was a wonderful singer, and other members of the family who eventually, they or their children, did good things in music, so they did come from a musical family. Well, we were pretty poor. We didn't have very much. Dad was a farmer, and he worked hard and that, but I remember one day, not terribly long after that, I would imagine it'd be a month or two after that, Dad came home from Salt Lake City with a big van following him, and what was in that van? They stopped at my house and took out a piano, and it was like magic to me. And they put that piano in the house. My dad sat down, and he could play cards, and he played a funny song, played cards and sang a funny song. I can still remember the song, and played the cards to it and sang a song for me. And I thought he was just a real maestro. I was so excited. And I started picking out tunes immediately, and we had a wonderful time with that piano. I had my 2 sisters and brother were all older than me, so they had first choice at taking lessons. I had an aunt who taught beginners on piano, and so they took some lessons, and they were interested, but not like me. I used to run home from school to beat them home so I could learn their lessons and practice them, and I did that. And they were older and didn't feel very good about playing little tiny beginning piano pieces anyway. So pretty soon they had quit, and I was taking piano. and I was able to learn it fast. It just came to me easily. Reading came easy, fingering came easily. I didn't seem to have to work terribly hard, and I never got tired of playing. And the joke went around the family, they used to have to ask me to quit. They never had to ask me to practice. But I loved that piano so much. And time went on. As time went on, we couldn't take steady lessons all the time. I would have to stop for a while till they got a little more money from some of their crops or something. And maybe I could take for a winter or something. And then as I got older, and there were professors from the BYU that would come around each of the small towns there and teach piano during the summertime when they were not busy at college. And I took from a couple of them for a summer, 2 or 3 summers, I don't remember how many. But it was wonderful, and I just, when they give me some music, I just eat it up, and I have it learned in no time. So, but my father used to go to Salt Lake to the music stores, and he used to say, now I've got a daughter that can play anything you've got in this store, and I want your hardest piece. Well, that was about the time I started playing concertos and things like that, and I was kind of ready for them. So he would bring something home which looked too hard, and I would just go for it, one note at a time, and I really, really loved them. And I did get so that I played some concertos and did quite a bit of playing. And I also, in the meantime, played for primary and things in church a little bit, and accompanied people when they sang, and accompanied my father's quartet. He was the bishop, and the bishopry formed a quartet, and the 3 of them and the secretary. And I practiced with them a lot and did a lot of that. And then I had a chance to go to business college. I got a scholarship because I was a fast typist thanks to the piano. And I lived in Salt Lake with my cousins and my aunt and Uncle Joe and Aunt Rose. And I got lonesome for a piano. So I went one day, this is when I had a job now, and was earning fair money. And I used to take great joy in buying things for Mom and Dad, a winter coat, anything I could buy for them. And we still had a piano at home. But I got very, very lonesome for some music. So I went to the music store, and there in the music store's window sat a marimba. And I walked in there and asked about that marimba, and they took me to it and gave me a couple of mallets, and I started playing around on that marimba. Well, it had the most beautiful organ-like tones. I had to have that marimba. So I bought me that marimba, and I rented a little room upstairs in the music store, and went at lunchtime and after work. I lived only a half a block from there, or I worked half a block from there, and taught myself a marimba. And it wasn't very hard because I could play the piano, and I played by ear, so I knew what notes I wanted to hit and all that, and I learned that marimba. And I thought I needed to know more about it, so I took 10 lessons from a fellow that practiced the marimba, and he'd come in and play for a little while and go home, and that didn't help me much, so I just continued to learn it myself. But I got so that I played the piano in church, at funerals, at weddings, at all sorts of things, and I played that marimba for 25 years until I took sick and couldn't play it anymore because it was hard on my heart. And in the meantime, I played the piano, and after I was married, we moved into a ward that needed an organist. And so I went every day for a whole week and practiced that organ, and that next Sunday I played the organ in Sunday school, and they let me choose a song so I could play the ones I wanted, and I played with my foot and everything on that organ, so I learned the organ. So for the next 20 years or 30 years, I played organ and piano for church and everything, and I did a great deal of accompanying. I love to accompany somebody. I like to do something with someone else in music. So I became an accompanist and did that. And along the way, when I was about 20 years old, something kind of fun happened. I had a boss who had a daughter that was in New York, and she was an opera singer, and his son played the violin and played well, and he played in the symphony in Salt Lake. So we talked music a little bit, and one day we were talking about Jeanette MacDonald, who was a beautiful actress at that time and singer, and they did many musicals in those days. And he said, "Oh, I saw her in Naughty Marietta the other night, and believe me, she can sure sing high. She did beautiful." And I said, "Oh, I've seen that. She sure can." I said, "She hit F above high C." And he says, "How do you know?" And I said, "Well, I heard her. I was there, and I heard her." "Well, how do you know it was F above high C?" And I said, "Well, I heard it. I just knew it." And he says, "You mean to tell me you've got perfect pitch?" And I said, "What's that?" So he told me what perfect pitch was. So we tried me out at home on the piano, and I could tell all the notes from the other room and everything, and I found out that I could do that, and that was interesting and fun to find that out. I thought everybody could do that, so that was kind of a fun thing. But I did a lot with music, and I did a lot of my own arranging and of the popular and semi-popular songs. My favorite music was classical piano, but when I played for weddings or things like that, I would choose the better and nicer songs from the musicals that were being put on in those days, and the love songs, and I played them, and I liked the regular ones that we danced to also, but I liked the kind of semi-classical ones the best. But I ended up loving all kinds of music and enjoying it, and still love my classical piano. I also played some classical on the organ, but I was best on the piano. And that's kind of the story of my music. Till in the middle of my life, I had worked too hard at it and played marimba too hard and all that, and it had gotten to my heart and hurt my heart, and I had to take some years off and recover from that. And so I finally sold my marimba. It was like selling another child almost, because none of my children are interested in that. But I later was able to pick up the piano and organ again, and in my later life did a lot of accompanying and always played for church.
Action! Hi, I'm Shelly Mackey. Used to be Shelly Eason. I'm the daughter of Richard. Anyway, this is my family. This is my husband AJ. And my oldest son Jacob, he's 10, and my youngest son Jonathan, soon to be 7. And we are here. We have a couple questions for Grandma. My grandma, their great grandma, Beth. And my question is, well, last time I saw you, Grandma, at Dad's house a couple years ago, I had mentioned the Great Salt Lake, that I'd been there with the boys to visit, and saw the museum or the old salt air there, and saw the pictures, and immediately you piped up and you were telling me, oh, we used to hang out there and about the train, and I would just love a really extended story about your experience with Saltaire. You're courting there, taking the train and dating, and your boyfriends. So that's my question. I would love to hear about that. And I guess AJ has a question also that you can answer.
We do too.
Yeah.
I would like to know about your most memorable vacation
The longest one.
and longest away from Utah. I'm sure you had many, but
The farthest one.
your most memorable trip across the country.
My turn?
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Grandma, I was... what was I gonna
Okay.
Oh yeah. Did you play any sports when you were a kid? Maybe? Can you drink?
Any sports? What her favorite sport was or something?
Johnny, your turn. My turn!
Okay.
I knew you played my mom told me that you played the piano and did you play any other, like, instruments like a guitar or a flute? Or a trumpet? Bye. We love you, Grandma.
We love you,
We
bye.
love you. Looking forward to your stories.
Love you. Peace.
Now this is Shelly and AJ's family, and I'll start with Shelly then. Shelly, you asked me to explain my experiences and tell stories about Saltaire and boyfriends and stuff like that. That was a wonderful time of my life. First I got to start with Saratoga, though, in Lehigh. That was like my Saltaire experience, I thought. Saratoga was a resort right by Utah Lake, and they had dances there every Saturday night, all summer long, and there is where we went with our boyfriends, and we would dance to lovely music and the moon on the water. We would dance to all the beautiful moon songs and everything, and that was quite a romantic time of my life. I was quite a dreamer, and I seemed to have boyfriends, and I seemed to get asked to dance all the time, and enjoyed my young life. I even had to wear glasses all my life, and they still would ask me to dance. Anyway, that was a place. And then when I moved to Salt Lake and worked in Salt Lake, there was when I got to go to Saltaire. That was a wonderful place, a great big dance hall with gorgeous lights and music, and more water and more moons and everything, and very romantic. And they would have a strobe light that they would turn on every once in a while during the dances. That was exciting.
She wanted you to talk about the
That was
train ride
where
too.
our boyfriends went took us there. That was a wonderful time.
Mom,
And
she wanted you to talk about the train ride too. Maybe I didn't write that.
And to get out to Saltaire was quite a ways, and we did have to ride on the train. That was kind of an exciting, fun thing, and different. We didn't. It's the only place we ever went on the train, and so that was fun. Sometimes we'd go for the afternoon and evening both, and we'd spend time on the beach with swimming in the salt water and floating like you could float better than anywhere else on earth probably. And that was a wonderful thing. Very colorful, and a lot of the rides that we could take also. Can't remember them very much. They were scary. Anyway, I better go on now to AJ. You asked what was the farthest journey from Utah, and where and why. And that was when we went to Hawaii. That was a wonderful trip. George and I went with my brother and sister-in-law, and we went with a tour group to Hawaii, and oh, what a wonderful trip that was, the most beautiful of my whole life. And George had been there on a mission, so he loved the idea of going back. We saw all the wonderful places there and had a beautiful trip. I hadn't been very well, so it was good for me to get down to sea level, and I had to stay in our apartment, in our hotel, and rest some, but I did have some wonderful times there also. Now we better go on to Jacob, who I understand is very good at sports. He asked, did I play any sports as a young girl? That meant a lot to you, and what were they? And what did you learn from them? Well, I was very active, and I did love sports, but we girls didn't have much competition in sports. We played basketball in our gym class, and sometimes after school we played softball, and we'd go outside and play softball during the day at school and everything. But the girls never did compete in those sports. The boys, of course, did all the time. When we would have our big track meets, we had what they called a posture parade, and there were 32 girls who were chosen. You had to have perfect posture to be in it. And the different schools, there were about 6 towns that did compete in that, and we would get out on the field and do some really neat formations in marching with our band playing and that was exciting and a great deal of fun. And my Lehigh bunch would win, it seems like almost every time. Of course, that's my memory. And we would do that. And then we did compete in running and racing, in the 50-yard dash and the 100-yard dash, and in the hurdles, I remember. And I was a very fast runner. Not the very fastest, but I was about second best in that. And I could do well in those sports. And but I couldn't run the mile like some girls could. So I did love those sports, and I loved the times out of doors. Everything out of doors I loved. And that's the story of my sport. Now, Jonathan, you play the piano very well. What other instruments did you learn to play? Okay. I understand, Jonathan, that you love music a lot. And I did play other instruments. I played the piano ever since I was a little girl, but when I was grown up, I got me an organ, and I played the organ. I played for church and choirs, yard and state choirs, with the piano and the organ. And then I bought myself a marimba. And a marimba is one of those instruments that you stand and play with 4 mallets. You can play some pieces with 2, and usually 4. And I taught myself how to play that marimba beautifully, just like you do the piano, the upper hand of the piano or organ. And I loved it like a child, like it was my child. And I played the marimba for about 25 years. And it was very hard on your heart because you had to use a lot of energy and pressure for the louds and soft. So I had to quit after that. But I loved that marimba, and I'd play it 2 or 3 times a week, most of the time, during those 25 years. And my children loved it too. We had a wonderful time with that marimba. Had a wonderful time with that marimba. I joined a marimba orchestra for a short time, and we would travel from one city to another, and there were about 25 or 30 marimbas in that orchestra, and I was first marimba right on the front row, and enjoyed that. And then we moved to California, so I had to quit that, but I took my marimba with me and continued to play. And the piano, organ, and marimba are the main instruments that I played. Played my sister's violin a little bit, but my fingers were too short and I couldn't handle that as well. Thank you for asking those questions. They were nice.
Hi, my name is Sheila Lamb, formerly Eason. I'm an Eason. Welcome to our home. This is my husband, Jeremy Lamb. This is my son, Nate. This is my daughter, Summer. Great-grandchildren. I have a question for you, Grandma, that I'd like to ask. I grew up and had a really hard time in my adolescent years. Struggled with rebellion, and I would like to know if you ever struggled with rebellion and how you dealt with it, and how everybody dealt with it with you. If you did, if you actually were a rebel. I don't know. I'm not sure I believe you were. So I would love to find that out. Jeremy, would you like to ask a question?
Hey, I'm Jeremy, and I'd like to know what the most important lesson you've learned about being happy in life has been. That's it.
And Nate, would you like to ask her a question?
Hello, I am Nathan Hegland. And my question to you is, what was your favorite thing to do in your high school years? Because I'm in high school right now, and I'm 16. And I like to do a lot of fun stuff, so I was wondering what you would like to do in your high school years. Alright, Summer, your turn.
Summer.
Hi, great grandma. So I have two questions for you. My first one is, where did you grow up? Yeah, that's my first question. My second question is, I know that you were alive during World War II, and I was wondering how and how that affected your life.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Grandma, my grandma, I miss you very much. I love you, and I hope to see you soon one of these days.
Me
You
too.
meet my children. Bye.
Can't wait. Bye.
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 All right, now Sheila, I have your questions here, so I'll start with you. You say, I had a hard time in adolescence with being rebellious. Have you ever struggled with anything in adolescence, and how was it? I don't remember ever struggling in my adolescence other than being so shy that I was almost afraid of myself. We lived in Lehigh. Everybody there was a little bit poor, and most of them farmers, not everyone. And we had plenty of friends, lots of fun, but we made our own fun. We would get together and wander up the street, and some boys would be together and wander down the street, and we'd stop at Tilly's house, which was a great big beautiful home, and she was an only child, and we could go there anytime and stay as long as we wanted. And we'd have a good time, but our good times were mostly like planning a little party and some eats or make ice cream or something. And then we had dances. We had church dances and school dances quite a lot, and they were pretty special to us. We didn't date a lot. I know right now some of the young people want to date almost every night and be with friends. It wasn't that way in Lehigh. We would go home and do our lessons all week long, and on the weekends we'd find each other and have a good time. And that was We did love the sports. We were very good. Our basketball team and football team was very, very good, and we did do that. So that was about the main thing we did. However, I was trying to figure out what rebellious things I had done. The only thing I can think of was once when the boys had the car and they climbed over somebody's fence and stole some watermelons and put them in the car, and the way we went somewhere, the park or somewhere, and ate them. And I felt so guilty, but I also felt like I'd really done something. And no, I had no trouble with any guilt. I had a wonderful life. I was never offered a cigarette. I was never offered a drink. I was never offered anything in our little Mormon town. It was good living. I hope that's okay. Now, Jeremy, you say, what was the most important lesson you've ever learned about being happy? Oh, this is a good thing I learned. I was always a worrier. I was happy. I thought I was, in my way, but I was very shy and always worried about doing the right thing and things like that. And one day, my daughter Adria said to me, this was about in the middle of my life, she said, Mother, I've decided that I'm going to be happy. I found out that I believe that the only way you can be happy is within your own self, and I'm going to get up every morning and I'm going to tell myself that I'm going to be happy that day and make it a happy day. Now Adria's one that always felt terribly bad if everybody around her wasn't happy. It didn't please her at all, and she was that way. But you know, I learned that lesson from her, and I've said that hundreds of times since then, and it's done worlds for me. And I believe that's as good a way of being happy as any. One thing I've always been very joyous about is when I could do some service for someone, when I was wanted to play for somebody or anything else could help them. That made me happy, too. That's my main secret. Nathan, you asked what was your favorite thing to do in your high school years. Didn't I just answer that one? No, I answered Sheila. In our high school years, our football and basketball team were everything to us in our high school years. The girls didn't compete, the boys did, and believe me, we were loyal to them. You know, in our high school years, I remember another thing. I remember how patriotic we felt. And we would have our flag. We would say the Constitution or whatever it was.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of Allegiance every morning in school. And I remember feeling patriotic and feeling loyal to my school as well. And that was a beautiful feeling. We were very much so. The main thing was our games and the dances afterward. And I found that I always somehow had a boyfriend and did quite a lot of dancing, so I was quite a happy person in those days. But in our small town, we had to make a lot of our own fun. The rest of it was just getting together for a party or something. Now Summer, by the way, I have heard what neat children you are, Nathan and Summer, and how good looking you both are. You might guess where I heard that. You asked, where did you grow up? And so I'm going to talk about my town of Lehigh. It was just a neat town.
Now
It's
that
big
was
enough to have,
that was Nathan.
this was, yeah, this. No, Summer said, where did you grow up?
She asked about World War II.
Well, I think she must have asked both of them.
Okay.
Maybe this one did belong to Nathan. It's just about down to Summer's name, but anyway, I think maybe this was yours, Nathan. I can't tell which one of you it belonged to. I grew up in Lehigh, and there were about 3,500 people in Lehigh, and it was just a neat town. We were all in the church, and we enjoyed that. We enjoyed our neighbors. I had a girlfriend that every time I had to go to the store, I called her up, and she met me at the halfway mark and went to the store with me. We did things like that all our lives long. We were never alone very much. And we didn't have sleepovers and things like that, like they do so much now. At nights we spent at home with our families and getting our lessons or doing other things. And we got up in the mornings, and in the summertime we would go pick strawberries or peas or raspberries or things like that as soon as we got old enough to earn a little bit of money for our school clothes. And I remember getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and the big truck coming down the street and gathering us up, and we go over to Pleasant Grove where they had fields that grew these things, and they'd take them to the cannery over in Pleasant Grove. And we did that in the summer, and we'd have a lot of fun. We'd get up so early because it wasn't hot early in the morning, and then the rest of the day we'd go home and sleep and rest. We did a lot of that sort of thing. And life was kind of serious, but we also had our times of happiness. And we were always happy in our family. I don't remember hardly ever quarreling in the family. Life wasn't as complicated then. It was very, very good. Now I'm to Nathan, to Summer. I'm to Summer now. How did World War II affect your life? During World War II, I was married, and we hadn't been married long. We lived in California, and we lived down in Long Beach, and that was right near the ocean, right near the water. So at nights we had to black our windows so that there was not the least bit of light peeping out, and they turned all the lights out in the town and all along everywhere because they were afraid that planes and ships maybe would come and bomb us since we were so close to the ocean, and that would have been a very good spot for them to start to get us into the war and to come to our land instead of us going to them. So it did affect us somewhat, and then George was called up to apply to join the army. So we went up there and they examined him and asked him if he'd ever had any ailments or ever any broken legs or anything like that, and he said, oh no, he was in fine health. He said, and then he told them, I did have a horse run me into a fence and hurt my knee, and it took me about a year to get over it, but it's fine now. Well, when they examined his knee and saw what was going on, they said, get out of here, you're for it. So he didn't get to go to the army. He came home feeling so sheepish, and he just hung his head, felt ashamed. But I couldn't help being pretty glad, because it wasn't very long after that until Richard was born. And that's the main way it affected us personally. Now, that's the...
Hi, my name is Jennifer Eason. I am Richard's daughter. Everybody calls me JJ. And I am here because I'm going to ask some questions for Grandma Eason. My family is not here. My husband and my children are currently on our houseboat in the San Juan Islands. I couldn't get back in time. I apologize, but you know, we are selling that property, so we're gonna be, you know, we'll be all back together again very soon. My questions are, let's start with the simple ones first. What were Dad's first words? And what were your dreams when you were a little girl?
That's a great one.
Who are you now, and tell me how you see yourself. And my last question is, what do you like best about your life and yourself now? And if you have any insight on it, you could probably tell me if we ever figure out what we want to do. But that's just extra credit. So anyway, thank you. I love you, Grandma. I'll see you soon.
Okay, Jennifer, now it's your turn. I have your questions here in front of me. And there are two questions that I'm going to put together because as I get to the second one, I want to say the same things. So I'm going to do that, and I think that will work. Your first question, tell me how you see yourself. Who are you now? And the other one, what do you like best about your life and yourself? All right. It's hard to see how you tell how you see yourself when you get old like this, because there are many things you don't like as you get older. You don't like the way you look and things like that. But I see myself now as, in some ways, a lot like I was when I was a child. I see some of the same timidness and the same desire to not have to deal with social life so much that I used to feel when I was small, because I was so very, very shy. And yet there are other ways that I can see that I've certainly progressed. I progressed very, very far in how I can understand what I read, understand the gospel, understand the scriptures and things like that, which is a wonderful thrill for me, because I have had some very, very wonderful experiences in that way. One thing, you ask what I like best about your life and yourself. I always appreciated the fact that anybody ever wanted me to do anything, and if they wanted me to accompany them, which came very often, very much of it, I could hardly believe that I was wanted for anything. And all my life long, I appreciated the fact that I could do those things for people. And one thing I like best is the fact that I tried never to say no if I could help someone. I never said I was too busy. I'd drop everything and go. And that was what I wanted to do. Now, you asked me a neat little question here that's kind of fun, because it's funny. You say, what were Dad's first words? Well, on his first birthday, I wrote down in his baby book that he could say 12 words. And when I went back later, I tried to figure out what they were, and I think they would have had to be Mama, Daddy, no, bye, goo-goo, any silly things, and I laughed at myself to think that he could say 12 words. But I did have a few written down that I was sure I had heard, and of course he had to be the smartest baby around. I'm sure he said Mama. I'm sure he said a few words like that. Others, I'm sorry that I can't remember what I have written down, and I don't have the book available. What were my dreams when I was a little girl? I was always a dreamer. I had great dreams. I dreamed I could do lots of things. I would go out in the yard, on the grass, under a tree, under a bush, under a rose bush, and I would look up at the tall poplar trees that we had beside our house, way up in the top of them. I was sure there were fairies up there. I believed in fairies. I believed in magic. When I saw that piano in that, I thought it was magic, because that beautiful stuff would come out. And I had many dreams of those times. As I got a little bit older, my dreams got a little bit more reality, that I wanted to do some of them. And that was interesting. I wanted to walk through a garden with the flowers up to my knees and up to my waist. And I had an aunt that Grandma used to take me to see, and her front yard was full of flowers, and I could do that. Little things like that. And my life was a beautiful, beautiful dream when I was small. And I'm grateful for that, because I had that sweet memory. I believe that's okay for those questions. And Jennifer, the last question you've asked me is a real challenge, and I'll see what I can do with it. You say, do we ever really figure out what we want to do with our life? And if so, give me your insights on it. I'm going to have to tell you a few things that happened to me, and a few things the way I felt in order to answer this. One thing, so many things in life happen to you to change your life to a different course completely sometimes, the good and the bad and the tragedies, that you can't always follow your plans. You have to change plans along the way. We'll figure that part answered. When I got out of high school, I had friends, and I had a boyfriend, and they all married the fellow they were going with at that time, right out of high school. I could not do that. I had something in me that said I had to accomplish something else, or get some education, or do something besides. Now, business college was the only thing I had that I could do. I had one typing contest in high school, and so I needed to I just had to stop a second and collect my thoughts so that I would get this all right. I want to continue. I did go to business college, and I found that I was very good at it. It was a thing that I do well, and I did my best, won some honors, and was very happy with that, and that was the work I did the rest of my life. Now, I'd like to say to you...
Hi, Grandma. Okay, my questions, I have questions. Number one, what is yours and Grandpa's, what was yours and Grandpa's favorite activity? Number two, what was your, I want to hear about more of your younger life experience, I guess, experiences in your younger life, right? I understand there's something to do with eggs or something. So, yeah, I'd like to hear about that. Also, what was one of your favorite Christmases? I would like to know one of your favorite Christmases. And who's your favorite grandson?
And then say, of
All
course,
right.
and
Love you, Graham. Huh?
say, of course, this is James
Of
speaking.
course, this is James speaking. Didn't know by the mug. So, okay.
All right, now, James, it's your turn, and I apologize for having to hold this paper, but I'm 92 and I can't remember everything you ask. I don't want to miss anything. You asked to tell something about my experiences in my early life. Well, I'll tell you, one thing about me, I was a very, very shy, conscientious little girl. And when I was really small, every morning I took a quart of milk in a little bucket down a block away from our house to my Grandpa Anderson. And he called me Old Faithful because I always came down and I never spilled a bit of it. And that's why my dad let me carry it down to him. And another experience I had, we had chickens and we sold eggs. And at nights after school, we'd go down in our basement and we'd wash those eggs with a damp cloth very carefully and pack them and send them out. And that was one of the fun things I did. What else? Oh, I want to tell you about the tithing. This is really the truth. My dad was a bishop for about 9 years there, and all the time I was growing up, and by the time I was 11 or 12, he was still bishop, and his office was our home. They didn't have church office, bishop's offices in churches at that time. They hadn't built them that way, and so our home was where people came to pay their tithing. And I was the only one in our family, the youngest, that he would allow to write their tithing receipts for the people, because I was so careful and so exact. And from then on, when people had come to pay their tithing, and Dad wasn't there, and sometimes Mother, I could take their tithing and make out a receipt, and it always balanced perfectly, and I was so proud of that. But I was very good with figures, and as you'll hear from some other question, and that was quite a thrill for me to be able to do, to handle the tithing money and count it. Now, my favorite activity with Grandpa, the thing I loved most with Grandpa was when he would take me for long rides and we would go up into the mountains. And believe me, I thought those mountains belonged to me. Every mountain I ever saw, I wished I could get to the top of. And I loved it so much, and he loved it too. But he was so patient and so good to me. And that was really my favorite. We'd often do that on Sundays. I'd feel as good as if I was at church up in the mountains. And we loved that. My favorite Christmas, they all stand out, but we got together on Christmas Eve at our home with all of the family, and I loved that so much every year. But one year we had a fire in our home and couldn't meet in our home. And this, I suppose, is my favorite Christmas. We had our Christmas at George's office, or his doctor's office, and we're not in our house. We were living in an apartment by then, and we didn't have our musical instruments or anything to make music with, but that was the sweetest Christmas we ever had. We were all together. None of us got hurt in the fire. Everything was okay, and the Spirit of the Lord was with us, and that was my favorite Christmas. Now, my favorite grandson? Wow. Well, I'll tell you about one of the very best living ones, and that's you, James. You know that. James, you have always been so good to me. You call me on the phone. You thank me for everything. You send me gifts, and I love you for that. You're a wonderful grandson, and I do think the world of you, and I've told you that. However, let's see, I have 7 grandsons and 2 step-grandsons. Every one of them is good looking, and I have to say that my favorite one is the one I happen to be with at the moment, because I love you all. But You're very special to me, don't forget that. I believe I'm through with this.
You're on.
Hi everybody. Here we are. We're in Washington, just doing the video, I guess. I'm going to introduce everyone because we haven't seen you guys in so long. I got Maddie here. She's 4 years old, and we got Ellison Noel. She's 6. DJ up front there. He's almost 10 now. Katie girl. She's all 11, going on 12, and Mom, of course, Tara. And we're all doing good here in Washington. It's very wet. And I'm supposed to start with a question for Grandma. My question is about typing. I know it's big in our family, so I wanted to know where you learned it from. Have you always been a good typer? And if it runs in the family, if it's been going on for a long time. And we got another next question. I'll go with Tara, the wife.
Hi, Grandma. I wanted to know, when you and George were raising the kids, what was your most memorable family vacation or trip? And then I guess we'll go to Katie.
Hey, I was just wondering, what's your favorite piano piece to play and why?
And then that's the next one. Now let's go with DJ.
Hey, Grandma. Do you like living in Utah or Wyoming more?
Good question. All right, Ellie, why don't you ask yours?
Did you go fishing a lot when you were a little girl?
That's a good question.
And then lastly, Maddie.
I think what's my favorite thing? When I go fishing, I grow up.
Wow.
How about Grandma? What's your favorite season?
My season name is Caroline.
I would say, what is it?
Grandma, my favorite color is Maddie, purple and pink.
And then say, and what's your favorite color, Grandma?
What's your favorite color, Grandma?
There you go.
Good.
Finally.
Well, it's really